I'm going to be reading Mud from Ryan's book, The Dreamer. It starts out, plip, plip, plop. Oip, 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 oip. Tin, 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 tin. For a month, clouds spilled. Mountains slid into valleys, houses swallowed into shallow lakes, and the rocks and dirt that held fast to the train tracks disappeared. Father prepared to leave for work to repair the railroad, and we'd be gone for several weeks. From a window, Naphtali and Rodolfo watched him walk from a house to the platform to wait for the train. As the workers arrived, they huddled around him. Father does not have a sour face today. He looks happy and nice. He is happy. He is the boss, and everyone must follow his orders. But they like him. See how he jokes and the men laugh? Rodolfo shook his head. You would laugh at his jokes, too, if you needed your job. Father has many friends, insisted Naphtali. When he is home, our table is always crowded. Ah, yes, the great Jose Reyes. The more people at his table, the more important he feels. But he passes out invitations like overripe plums. Rodolfo's face twisted with disgust. Better for us if he stays in the forest. Why? Why? Naphtali, are you not miserable? Rodolfo held up one hand and began tapping each finger in sequence. We cannot sit in the salon. We cannot eat unless our hands have been scrubbed raw. We cannot make noise. We cannot sing. We must think as he thinks. Rodolfo's shoulders sagged. We can only be what he wants. Even my madre is a servant in his presence. We are all at his mercy, and as soon as you get older, it gets worse. No, it will not get worse because I will not be stubborn like you. You think it is my fault? And that if you are obedient, you will grow up and be his pride and joy? Rodolfo smirked. Buena suerte. Good luck to that. When you are my age, you will see. Outside, the whistle blew and the train pulled away. The boys watched until the caboose disappeared into the leafy cavern. I wish I could go into the forest, said Naphtali. It's a long ride and not that much fun, said Rodolfo. Why are you so eager? I want to see everything, said Naphtali. The tall pines and parrots and beetles and eagles. And Father says there is a bird in the forest that tells the future. Ah, Rodolfo nodded. The chuka bird. If you hear it call on your right side, it's a good omen and means fortune and happiness. And if you hear it call on your left, it is a warning and means bad luck and disappointment. They say the chuka bird does not lie. You will hear it before you ever see it, though. It is a very shy bird. I want to see the chuka bird, and I want to see the other father, the nice one. Rodolfo shook his head, then walked from the room. Naphtali whispered, I want to see everything. The days became weeks. The relentless rain forced everyone to stay indoors, and the mud prevented any wagon from maneuvering the streets. Eventually, Uncle Orlando could not get to his office, so he came to Naphtali's house to write his newspaper articles at the kitchen table. Uncle Orlando was Mamadre's younger brother, and a taller version of her with the same wide face and brown puppy-like eyes. Naphtali loved to watch him work. He set up his own workplace at the table next to his uncle, imitating everything he did. While Uncle Orlando wrote, Naphtali copied words from books. If Uncle Orlando looked up a word in the dictionary, Naphtali did the same. When Uncle Orlando tucked his pencil behind his ear, rose from the table, and paced back and forth, Naphtali shadowed him. The rain did not surrender, and neither did Naphtali. On the fourth afternoon of Uncle Orlando's stay, Larita played with her dolls in the kitchen floor. Rodolfo hummed as he did his housework, and Mamadre made potato turnovers for dinner. At one of the end of the table, amid his papers and books, Uncle Orlando wrote. Naphtali stood next to him, leaning closer and closer. Nephew, I'm not sure there is room for both of us in this chair unless you sit in my lap. Are you going to watch me write every word, every single sentence? Asked Uncle Orlando. Naphtali put his finger on Uncle Orlando's paper. What is that word? That word is Mapuche. They are the indigenous people who live in Araucania, our neighbors. Naphtali scooted his own piece of paper closer and copied the word. I suppose that if this keeps up, I will have to make you my partner someday. Naphtali smiled and nodded vigorously. Well then, if you're going to assist me in my work, I will need to adjust the sound of your annoying breathing. Uncle Orlando reached over and pulled Naphtali into his lap, tickling and wrestling with him. Soon they were rolling on the floor. Rodolfo jumped up and pounced on them. Lorita squealed as they moved dangerously close to her dolls. Mamadre stood with her hands on her hips. I see that the dreariness of the rain has made us all need a diversion. Enough of sitting in this one room. Come, I will read to you in the salon. But we're not allowed in the salon, Naphtali reminded her. Mamadre smiled and raised her eyebrows. Today, you are allowed. While Mamadre and Uncle Orlando made hot chocolate, Naphtali and Lorita and even Rodolfo giggled as they dragged blankets from their rooms to the salon. Soon, they were all snuggled beneath the blankets and sipping the warm drinks. Mamadre picked up a book, cleared her throat, and began a story transporting them to a land of elves and princesses. When the story ended, Lorita flung off her coverlet, jumped up, and skipped in a circle. I am a princess! I am a princess! Rodolfo teased. You don't look like a princess. Uncle Orlando looked at Mamadre. No, she does not. Can we do something about that? Mamadre smiled, rose from her chair, and kneeled at the giant brass-fitted trunk strapped with oak. None of them had ever seen the contents of the trunk. Naphtali looked at Rodolfo, who smiled and shrugged. Lorita pressed her hands over her mouth in anticipation. Mamadre lifted the heavy curved lid. The smell of musty clothes and cedar drew Naphtali closer. Mamadre took out a stack of folded dresses, a wool coat, and a fur hat, which she handed to Naphtali. Farther down, Mamadre found a lace petticoat and a filmy scarf. Lorita quickly pulled the petticoat over her clothes. As she twirled around, Mamadre lifted out a guitar. Uncle Orlando retrieved it and began to tighten and tune the strings. Mamadre found a top hat, which she presented to Rodolfo. While Mamadre tied Lorita's scarf, Naphtali stepped to the trunk. He peered over the edge. At the bottom, he saw a bundle of letters and postcards tied with satin ribbon. How many words have been saved inside? He leaned forward, reached down, grabbed the bundle, and fell in head first. Mamadre spun around. Naphtali! His muffled voice came from the bottom trunk. I am here! When Uncle Orlando lifted him up and set him on the sofa, Naphtali still held the bundle. Each letter had been opened from the top of the envelope. The flaps was still sealed with wax and stamped with the impressions of a heart. On the top letter, someone had written the word love above the seal. Mamadre took the bundle from him, put it back inside, and carefully closed the trunk. Naphtali, the lid could have fallen on your head. Or your hands. And for what? Some old letters and cards from relatives we do not even know? Promise me you will never open this trunk. Naphtali looked wistfully toward it. I promise. Uncle Orlando strummed the guitar. Naphtali, come stand next to me as my partner. How do you think we should proceed? Naphtali looked up with a song. My sentiments exactly, he said, propping one foot on a chair and the guitar on his knee. Rodolfo, will you honor us? No one in the family can sing as you can. And he began to play. Rodolfo hesitated and looked from Mamadre to Uncle Orlando for reassurance. Your father's not here, Rodolfo, and it would be a favor to me. Rodolfo turned back to Mamadre. She nodded. Something deep inside of Naphtali wanted Rodolfo to sing at the top of his lungs. He clapped wildly. Yes, he said. Rodolfo smiled and put on the top hat. He began softly at first. Okay, I apologize. Libbiamo nel lieto calicice la bellezza infiora. Let us drink from the goblets of joy adorned with beauty. He stopped and looked to each of them for reassurance. Uncle Orlando nodded. Continue, I know the song. From La Traviata, but sing louder and faster. It is a song of great spirit. And he strummed the opening chords. Rodolfo began again. Mamadre and Lorita danced. Naphtali stood up, tapped his foot, and clapped to the beat. Lorita and Mamadre waltzed faster and faster, both of them laughing. Naphtali could not take his eyes from Rodolfo's face, which had lost all traces of anger and sullenness. His voice was deep and rich and operatic. Rodolfo opened his arms wide and sang, his tenor round and full and so beautiful that Naphtali's eyes filled with water. Uncle Orlando finished the song with several resounding chords to accompany Rodolfo's last note. Rodolfo took off the hat and swept it in a great arc, and he bowed. Mamadre and Lorito rushed to hug him. Bravo! Yelled Naphtali. Here's a picture of them dancing and singing and playing the guitar. Naphtali could not remember if he had ever seen Rodolfo or Lorita so happy, or the last time he had heard Mamadre laugh out loud. He ran to his family and threw his arms around them, wanting this elation to last forever. But all too soon, Mamadre's body grew rigid. She raised a hand and tilted her head to one side. No one spoke as they listened for what Mamadre had heard. There was a faint train whistle. Although any number of trains passed through Temuco every day, she always knew the sound of father's. Her smile faded. Naphtali watched Rodolfo's face drain. Do not worry, said Mamadre. The train is not yet near. Now quickly, they all scrambled. Rodolfo and Uncle Orlando replaced the contents of the trunk. Lorito hurried to collect the cups and saucers, but her hand trembled so much that a cup fell to the floor and shattered. She began to cry. Naphtali rushed to her. It is all right, Lorita. You pull the blankets back to the bedrooms. I will pick up the pieces. Wide-eyed Lorita sniffled, but if father notices, I will say that I dropped it, said Naphtali. She swiped an arm across her tears, gave him a sweet smile, and began gathering the blankets. Meanwhile, Mamadre glided from one preparation to another, from the kitchen for a tablecloth to the dining room, from the cabinet for candelabras to the table. Attentive and methodical, she folded napkins and set out glasses and plates without saying a word. After Natali cleaned up the cups and saucers, he rushed to help Rodolfo and Uncle Orlando carry extra chairs to the table. He already dreaded all the adults who might look him in the eye and ask him questions. How many chairs? Mamadre answered without looking up. 12 at least. If father does not bring home that many guests, he will fill every place with strangers from the street. Comb your hair, wash your hands, I must go and warm las empanadas y el bistec. Naphtali's mouth watered at the suggestion of the potato turnovers and the steak smothered with onions. He hoped they would fill up the empty feeling that had overcome him at the sound of the train whistle, the feeling that he had suddenly lost something. He watched Mamadre turn and walk to the kitchen, her face now wan and preoccupied. What had happened to her laughter and twinkling eyes and flushed cheeks? Where had Mamadre buried them? Within the hour, father's boots pounded on the floorboards. His big voice filled the house. Aquí estoy! I am here! He blew the conductor's whistle. Naphtali, Rodolfo, and Lorita rushed to stand in front of him. They held their hands flat and then turned their palms up for inspection. Naphtali's were still pink from his vigorous scrubbing. Satisfactory, father nodded, and then headed toward the dining room. The door opened again, and men began to flood into the house. Railroad workers, shopkeepers, even a traveling merchant who had been waylaid overnight in Temuco. Father poured drinks from the sideboard and assigned everyone a seat. Naphtali sat in his chair with his best posture and studied his plate, avoiding any of the guests' eyes. He pushed the tablecloth aside and looked longingly underneath. If only he could escape to the shadowy company of boots. Father sat at the head of the table, jovial and generous to his guests, passing around stories as easily as he passed around el pan amasado, the homemade bread. He told tales about Percheron, horses, pumas in the wild, and the Mapuche Indians. What is the current situation with the Mapuche? Asked the merchant. We are trying to move them out of the area, said a shopkeeper, but many will not listen. These are difficult times for those who are trying to develop the land and make a nice community here in Temuco. Uncle Orlando cleared his throat. The Mapuche people have lived here for hundreds of years. Why should they leave their homeland? He had a fire in his belly and a determination in his eyes. Naphtali admired how his uncle never had a problem speaking out about what he thought was right or wrong. Would Naphtali ever have the confidence to do the same? Their presence is undesirable, said the shopkeeper. They do not want to conform to the ways of the townspeople. The Mapuche cannot even read. The shopkeepers must put up a sign shaped like a giant shoe above the shoe store and a sign shaped like a giant hammer above the hardware store, a giant key for the locksmith. It's absurd. And all this so they will know which building is which. That was true, thought Naphtali. He had seen those very signs. The giant shoe was his favorite. And what's wrong with that? Asked Uncle Orlando. Why do we not learn a little bit of their language? We came to their land. Why should they think as we think? Why should they give up everything they have known for generations? Naphtali considered Uncle Orlando's words. He could not imagine being pushed from his own home without his books and his collections, not to mention leaving his school and the river Cotton. His eyes followed the conversation one man to the other. Their voices grew sharper with each response. It is progress, said the shopkeeper. For me it is a business, nothing more, nothing less. Nothing less than greed, said Uncle Orlando. Your thinking is thick as the mud. Wait a moment, said the shopkeeper, studying Uncle Orlando. I know who you are. You're the one who owns La Mañana, the newspaper that publishes all the articles in favor of the Mapuche. Uncle Orlando stood up. Naphtali's eyes grew wide with fear. The shopkeeper was much larger than Uncle Orlando. Gentlemen, this is a family dinner. We will discuss the Mapuche at a more appropriate time. Uncle Orlando sat down and folded his arms across his chest. The shopkeeper speared his meat with his fork, and he ate it, and he chewed vigorously, his eyes darting from one person to the next. Mamadre, no one said a word. Mamadre rose from the table. Her chair scraped the floor, breaking the uncomfortable silence. Father pointed at one of his workers. Tell the children about the beetle you found yesterday. It was a beetle. Naphtali sat up a little straighter and strained to hear. Oh my God, a beetle! I found it on a luma tree. It looked like a living jewel wearing many fantastic colors. Pink, green, purple, and silver. And when I tried to catch the thing, it zipped away. One moment it was there, and the next, poof! He nodded at Naphtali. Young man, have you ever been into the forest? All eyes turned to Naphtali. He knew he must answer when an adult spoke to him, but his skin felt as if it were tightening, and blood rushed to his cheeks. The word could not escape. He tried again. Father shifted in his chair. His face reddened. Do not pay attention to him. He is absent-minded, and he spends so much time in idle thought he can barely speak. There's no telling what will become of him. I don't like this man. Naphtali sat with his eyes cast down, paralyzed. Was he breathing? He could not tell. There is nothing wrong with a little idle thought, said Uncle Orlando, and perhaps he needs the athletic outdoors and a trip to the great forest where he can focus on what is real. This beautiful land and its people before a developer tries to change it. He glanced at Naphtali. Nephew, you would like that, would you not? Naphtali lifted his eyes slightly and nodded. Father grunted. Maybe next year when he's not so feeble. He turned to Mamadre. Let us take coffee. Children, you are excused. Grateful to be released, Naphtali slid from his chair and ran to his room. There, with the muffled voices of the grown-ups in the background, he paused before his collections. He straightened his rows of rocks, twigs, and nests, touching each item of it, taking attendance. Father's words echoed, absent-minded, absent-minded. It did not make sense. How could he be absent-minded when his head was so crowded with thoughts? He opened the drawer and unfolded each piece of paper he had saved. Then he read the words, mouthing each one perfectly, before he replaced them. He added one more luma. Later, as he lay in bed, Naphtali tried to imagine the beetle on the luma tree, the one that looked like a living jewel and could disappear in the blink of an eye. Father's words haunted him. Naphtali wished the time would disappear, as fast as the colorful beetle in one poof, so he, too, could discover what would become of him. What is the color of a minute? A month? A year? And then there's drawing. I am poetry lurking in dappled shadow. I am the confusion of root and gnarled branch. I am the symmetry of an insect, leaf, and a bird's outstretched wings.